There is a profound truth that modern high-speed assembly lines will never truly grasp. The finest apple is never the one with the most chemically perfect skin shining under supermarket display lights. The finest apple is the one that has accumulated the fierce heat of summer, endured the biting autumn frost, and stubbornly drawn its sweetness from the deepest layers of the earth, where its roots fought to take hold. Deep within a serene valley lay the historic Collins orchard, home to a 16-year-old girl named Emma Collins. Ever since she was a little child, Emma possessed a rare, almost magical gift bestowed upon her by nature. Merely by closing her eyes and inhaling the scent of an apple's skin, she could accurately tell you the rainfall levels of that year's harvest. With just a single, small bite, she knew instantly if the tree was starved for water or overflowing with nutrients. If you are someone who believes that family traditions, the honest sweat of hard labor, and a deep reverence for the land are worth fighting for against the relentless tide of industrialization, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and join our community. And don't forget to drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching this story from? Every single one of your footsteps fuels our journey to bring these untold stories to light. Emma grew up beneath the comforting canopy of ancient apple trees alongside her grandfather, George Collins, an 82-year-old patriarch with heavily calloused hands and hair as white as winter snow. For over 40 years, George had never missed a single day. He possessed a worn, leather-bound journal, yellowed with age, where he meticulously recorded the unique traits of every single apple variety in the orchard, the ideal temperature for every spring bloom, and, most importantly, the family's secret recipe for artisanal apple cider vinegar. However, their peaceful sanctuary suddenly fractured when Emma's father passed away unexpectedly. The staggering financial burden of the entire orchard crashed heavily onto the shoulders of her mother, Sarah Collins. Bank loans loomed closer to their due dates, fertilizer costs skyrocketed, and the absolute peak of the crisis arrived when a massive industrial beverage conglomerate moved into the valley. They erected a colossal juice processing plant right across the property line. Armed with limitless capital, the conglomerate initiated a ruthless campaign of market-hostile takeover. They aggressively undercut prices, buying up the vast majority of the region's apple harvest at dirt-cheap rates to feed their mass-production assembly lines. The traditional fresh apple market collapsed almost overnight. Raw apple prices plummeted to rock bottom. Staring at stacks of unsold crates rotting in the sun, Sarah sat paralyzed at her kitchen table. The impending bank foreclosure felt like a tightening noose, and Collins' orchard faced the imminent threat of being seized, losing the land 3 generations had bled for. On a crisp October afternoon, a prominent corporate representative from the beverage conglomerate arrived at the Collins homestead. Stepping out of a pristine high-end luxury vehicle, he carried a formal land acquisition contract with an air of unvarnished arrogance. He looked directly at Sarah and spoke in a tone dripping with calculated pity. "Mrs. Collins, small-scale, artisanal farming models like yours are entirely obsolete. Look around you. Every single one of your neighbors has already signed over their orchards. If you stubbornly hold out, you won't even have enough to cover interest payments to the bank by the end of the season. This contract is the only lifeline left for your family." Many of the local farmers passing by offered similar well-meaning but disheartening advice, whispering that standing up against a multi-billion-dollar corporation was nothing short of financial suicide. Even Sarah, pushed to her absolute limit, began to contemplate signing the papers to surrender. But Emma refused to break. She stood out in the far corner of the orchard, staring intently at the tiny, slightly sun-blistered or misshapen apples, discarded ruthlessly on the ground fruits that failed to meet the rigid, cosmetic commercial standards of the industrial factory. Emma knelt down, picked up a small, neglected apple, wiped the topsoil off its skin, and took a bite. Instantly, a brilliantly sharp, intensely concentrated sweetness, accompanied by a crisp, refreshing acidity, exploded across her palate. In that moment, She realized a profound scientific truth. These apples looked flawed on the outside, but because they grew on the arid upper ridge, their roots had to tunnel twice as deep to find water. In doing so, they had accidentally concentrated the fruit's natural sugars and organic acids to a level twice as rich as the bloated, watery industrial apples grown for mass production. "Mom, we absolutely cannot sell this land," Emma cried out, rushing back into the house and placing thinly sliced pieces of the discarded apples on the table. "Look at these rejected fruits. They hold the deepest flavor in the entire orchard. If no one wants to buy our fresh apples, then we will transform them into something no one else can replicate." When Emma proposed the radical idea of utilizing the rejected harvest to manufacture high-value artisanal products, the conglomerate's analytical engineers, and even the elderly traditional farmers in the valley, openly mocked her. They sneered. "What does a 16-year-old girl know about global market economics? When world-class market experts are failing, what does she think a few bruised, scrap apples are going to do?" Turning a deaf ear to the mockery, Emma quietly climbed into the dusty, sunlit attic that held her grandfather's lifelong memories. There, she uncovered George's old leather-bound journal. Turning the fragile pages, which faintly radiated the scent of aged ink and dried flowers, Emma felt as though she could hear her grandfather's steady voice guiding her hand. She began to teach herself the intricate, ancient art of natural apple cider vinegar, brewing a slow, agonizing fermentation process inside heavy oak barrels that required months of absolute patience. Strictly forbidden from using a single drop of artificial chemicals or preservatives, mother and daughter threw themselves into the grueling labor from before dawn until long past midnight. They meticulously sorted the apples by hand, crushed them using an old manual press, and waited with bated breath for the natural wild yeasts to work their magic. From the very harvest the world deemed worthless scraps, they successfully birthed 3 premium product lines: traditional oak-aged apple cider vinegar, an exquisite, glowing amber liquid possessing a wonderfully mellow acidity and a rich, deeply comforting aroma of aged wood; concentrated apple nectar, a thick, velvety reduction extracted from pure apple juice, simmered continuously over a low firewood flame for 10 grueling hours until it achieved the dense texture of wild honey; handcrafted cinnamon-infused dried apple tea, crisp, thinly sliced apples dried naturally under the valley sun and gently cured over warming cinnamon vapors. What truly set their creation apart was that Emma completely refused to sell her products with desperate discount signs. On every single bottle of vinegar and every jar of nectar, she painstakingly applied a custom, hand-designed paper label. It bore her elegant handwriting, detailing the 40-year history of Collins Orchard, the profound love of her grandfather George, and the exact manner in which the earth had nurtured the fruit. They were not competing on price. They were selling a genuine piece of the savannah's memory and unyielding soul. Yet, the initial weeks brought nothing but agonizing silence. The small wooden stand erected outside the orchard gates saw only a scattering of curious onlookers who browsed briefly before walking away empty-handed. The bank's final foreclosure deadline was now less than 30 days away. The suffocating financial pressure hung heavily over every single family meal. Sarah looked across the table at her daughter, her eyes welling with tears. "Emma, are we just chasing an impossible illusion?" Emma reached across, tightly squeezing her mother's trembling hand, her eyes locked onto the brilliant autumn orchard outside. "Please trust me, Mom." True, honest quality simply requires time for the world to notice. Late in the month of November, as the first bitter winds of winter began to sweep violently through the valley, a vintage luxury car suddenly suffered a severe engine breakdown right outside the gates of the Collins property. Stepping out of the vehicle was Marcus Vance, a world-renowned celebrity chef who owned a sprawling empire of multi-starred Michelin restaurants in the world's culinary capitals. Marcus was a notoriously ruthless culinary purist, currently on a cross-country journey to discover untouched, artisanal ingredients for his upcoming winter menu. Seeking shelter from the biting cold while waiting for a rescue tow truck, Marcus stepped into Emma's small farm stand. The rich, deeply comforting aroma of simmering cinnamon apple tea and oak-aged vinegar instantly arrested his highly trained olfactory senses. Intrigued, he poured a tiny drop of the amber vinegar onto a small tasting spoon and brought it to his lips. The very instant the liquid graced his palate, Marcus froze in absolute shock. His eyes widened. This was not the harsh, chemically abrasive acidity of industrial mass-market vinegar synthesized in sterile vats. This was a symphony of profound complexity, a wonderfully bright, clean acidity, followed by a deep, earthy sweetness of the soil, rounded out by a faint, haunting whisper of smoky oak. It was the unmistakable taste of time, dedication, and uncompromised patience. That very evening, Marcus Vance authored a sweeping, emotionally charged review across his verified social media accounts, which commanded millions of Epicurean followers worldwide. He heralded the vinegar of Collins Orchard as the liquid gold of the valley, publicly declaring it a rare, unrepeatable masterpiece that no billion-dollar industrial factory on Earth could ever hope to replicate. The media effect was nothing short of a volcanic eruption tearing through the food industry. Within 48 hours, the phone lines at the Collins residence rang completely off the hook. High-end fine dining establishments, luxury five-star hotels, and elite organic boutique chains from major metropolises flooded their system with continuous orders. They were aggressively willing to pay 5, even 10 times the premium price, just to secure a single crate of Emma's handcrafted, oak-aged vinegar. While the surrounding commercial farms, the very ones that had eagerly sold their souls to the beverage conglomerate, were now weeping in financial ruin as the factory brutally slashed raw apple purchase prices to exploitative lows. Collins Orchard fell into a state of absolute product shortage. The surging revenue from their vinegar and nectar lines didn't just allow Emma's family to completely clear their massive bank debt in a single season. It generated a historic financial surplus they had never dreamed possible. Recognizing a seismic shift in global consumer behavior, the executive board of the massive beverage conglomerate was forced to undergo a total humiliation of their corporate strategy. The very same arrogant representative who had once tried to buy out the land returned to the Collins kitchen table, but this time his demeanor was profoundly submissive and deeply respectful. He carefully placed a brand new proposal before them. The conglomerate was desperately seeking to secure exclusive global distribution rights for Collins Orchard's premium vinegar line, offering an astronomical investment sum, completely abandoning their previous intentions of land acquisition. Sarah looked at Emma, who had now fully stepped into her role as the true visionary leader of the estate. Emma offered a polite but fiercely resolute smile. Looking the corporate representative dead in the eye, she spoke with absolute authority. "We are willing to partner with you to give our products a wider reach, but under one absolute, non-negotiable condition. The Collins Orchard brand identity must remain completely untouched, and the entire production process must strictly adhere to the manual oak barrel fermentation methods written in my grandfather's journal. We will never sell the soul of this orchard to chase mass-market industrial volume." Left with no leverage, the corporate giant had no choice but to nod in absolute agreement. This historic signing did far more than simply preserve Collins Orchard. It single-handedly revitalized the entire farming valley. As demand scaled, Emma and her mother began purchasing the cosmetically rejected apple harvests from hundreds of struggling neighboring farms at incredibly fair, premium rates, securing stable livelihoods for countless families who had been teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. On a glorious, golden autumn afternoon, as heavy, ripe apples swayed gently in the crisp valley breeze, Emma Collins stood in the center of her thriving orchard, looking up into the vast, clear blue sky. She reached down, gently brushing her fingers against her grandfather, George's old bared leather journal tucked safely at her side. In the quiet sanctuary of her mind, the old man's timeless words echoed with profound, brilliant clarity. Don't just try to sell more than the next person, Emma. Create something so profoundly authentic, so unique, that no one else in the entire world can ever replicate what you do. Collins Orchard stands defiantly to this day through all the turbulent shifts of the modern economy. It survives not because it is the largest operation, but because it possesses an irreplaceable, unyielding soul. While the rest of the world chooses frantic speed and short-term profit margins, the new generation of Collins Orchard chooses to protect the heartbeat of the land, transforming their family heritage into the ultimate, unbeatable weapon against the test of time.
Subscribe.